Welcome to another installment of the Goddess Keys, where we unleash and unlock the tools and the jewels to support us on our path back to ourselves and the remembrance of ourselves as God, Goddess informed. It's been a while since I've done one of these types of more podcasty content, and I am actually launching a new series specifically related to genetic path cutting, because this is something I get a lot of questions about, and it's a very nuanced topic, and I wanted to contribute to the realm of the internet as it relates to genetic path cutting and what can be entailed in the process, to open up the conversation globally to support people who are on this path and launch people who are on this path to even have a greater awareness that they are on this path. There's a lot of folks out there right now who are doing genetic path cutting, but they don't even know that they're doing it, and that's been a big piece of my journey, is genetic path cutting without knowing that I'm genetic path cutting. And it's like, when you don't have an awareness that you're doing it, there are certain pitfalls that you can end up in because of the lack of awareness, right? So I think, it's like that whole saying where they talk about knowledge is power. It's like knowing what your path is and kind of knowing what to expect, or preparing your genetic path cutting toolkit, both mentally, spiritually, physically, is really supportive. So first of all, what is genetic path cutting? Genetic path cutting is this concept that essentially is around folks who are activating their DNA. And one thing to activate your DNA is you must clear karma. All right. So there's sometimes you'll hear certain things in New Age spirituality where it's like, buy this meditation and you can activate your DNA, or I'm going to activate your DNA for you, And that's really not the way this works. It's very unique. You have to kind of make peace within your ancestry and see where trauma is lodged within your DNA and learn your ancestral stories, unravel those ancestral stories and heal karma from them. And it's like, once you heal karma and make peace with different parts of your ancestry, sometimes there are different parts of your ancestry that are at war with each other, or they were at war with each other, and maybe they passed away in a state of warfare. And so what does that mean for your DNA? What does that mean for your biology at a cellular level? There are parts of you that might be at war with each other. Okay. So sometimes this can manifest in the physical. In a lot of ways, this could manifest in the physical through disease. For example, sometimes one thing we don't talk about a lot, there's not a lot of information out there about it, but as we focus on consciously ascending and clearing karma, we get out of these karmic loops and karmic cycles, and we might evolve into another karmic loop and another karmic cycle. And a lot of times this could launch us into disease patterning. Like if we have an ancestor who died from a certain disease, and then we're tapping into that ancestry on our path cutting journey, if we're not mindful and cognizant, we can ascend into that disease. Okay. And once again, or let me just get out in front and say, I'm not a doctor. I'm not this is all entertainment purposes. I'm also not going to share everything on this platform just because of how things work with algorithms and whatnot. So I am going to be talking about this in a very surface way on YouTube. If you are interested in diving deep into the realm of genetic path cutting and, for example, like doing like a one-on-one kind of coaching journey as it relates to it or something, like reach out to me and we can talk more about that. And then I'm also going to be launching a workshop / online teach-in related to genetic path cutting. So stay tuned for those details because of the nature of the content that I'm going to be covering as it relates to this. Some of this can't just be completely open source, okay? But I want to make this as open source as I can, but then we start getting into weird legalities, and I'm not necessarily able to say everything that I want to say on the topic on this platform, okay? So if this is something you're really interested in diving deep as it relates to it, check the links below and reach out to me, okay? So all that to say, there are times where you can, ascension's not all sunshine and roses. Sometimes you can ascend into the patterns that a certain part of your ancestry died within, okay? And if you don't see that, right, if you're not kind of looking, if you don't have that bird's eye view for it, you can be bamboozled by different things, okay? And there's been many times on this path where I've been a little bamboozled and all that sort of stuff. And since I've started really getting serious about my role as a genetic path cutter, and I've created certain protocols, travel and karma clearing has been a lot more of a joyful and easeful path for me, okay? And I want to share these resources to folks who are on this journey, okay? There are certain protocol that you can take as you lean into genetic path cutting to make your role easier. Okay, so all that to say, genetic path cutting requires you to heal ancestral DNA. Well, how do you do that? A lot of times that's going to mean you traveling, okay? So a lot of y'all have these urges to travel to remote parts of the world or to go to very exotic locations around the world. And some of you have done that, right? Some of you have maybe taken trips and kind of like crossed some things off of your bucket list that you wanted to go do or see. And others have been in this like, okay, someday, or maybe others have been a mixture of both. Maybe like you've done some travel, but then there are certain places that you still want to go to. And you're like, one day I'm going to get around to it. I really want to make it out there. Okay. So as a genetic path cutter, if you're on this journey of healing your ancestry and activating your DNA, you know you're here to ascend. You know you're here to path cut or create a way for future generations to come to ascend in consciousness. Like if that, and you'll just know, right? Like this isn't something I can convince you to do. Like, and that's not what my content is for. This is for folks who already know that they're on this path on a soul level. Okay, that's what my content is for. So this isn't to convince you to become a genetic path cutter. You'll just know if this is something that's for you. And some telltale signs are you've always been interested in healing trauma. You've always been interested in healing, like you felt as though you were here to heal your DNA in some way. Maybe you felt a little scapegoated because of that, but you still kind of know that you're here to do that. Maybe you have just always wanted to travel to different like remote places. Maybe you're really connected with the land and the nature kingdoms. Those are some of the signs that might suggest that you are a genetic path cutter. So one thing I would say is if you are on this journey, take it seriously, right? Like don't think of it as a side project or a hobby, or something that seems frivolous. It's not frivolous, okay? You clearing out ancestral karma and trauma within your DNA is one of the most important things that you can do. And I know that we live in a society that would say otherwise, that might even say the exact opposite. A lot of times there are many interferences that can be put on the pathway of a genetic path cutter because of the depth of your role on this planet at this time. Okay. Now, in this series, I'm going to be sharing different genetic path cutting journeys that I've had. Okay. And I'm going to be eventually sharing them at different phases of consciousness that I was in during the time that I took these journeys. So some of these journeys, I'm not going to go super far back. I've been traveling the world and living abroad off and on for at least the past 10 years, right? So this is, I've been doing the whole world travel thing, leading retreats, doing different like educational expeditions in different international places for a really long time. Okay. But I didn't really fully embody my awareness of being a genetic path cutter until I would say about 2022. Okay. That's when things started clicking more. And then I didn't actually start rolling out a framework for genetic path cutting until about 2023, okay, like late last year. I had been working on a framework and I had to try and test it and make a lot of edits and stuff, but I've gotten into this really good synergy as it relates to it, and I've been able to test it throughout my own life and my own path, and then also working with folks with the genetic path cutting. And I want to be way more expansive with this material. Okay, so that's why I'm doing this series, first of all, to share some of the learnings on genetic path cutting. Some of y'all know that I've created a DIY deck related to genetic path cutting, which is definitely expanding, but that's one really great tool to utilize to support you on your journey. It's not the only one, but it's a great one to have on your toolkit. And that's something I'll share more information about in content to come, as well as content as it relates to the genetic path cutting teaching. And if you are seeking like a little bit more one-on-one support with it. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But let's say that you are on this path, like that you're here to heal ancestral karma, heal your DNA. Let's talk about some of the obstacles that you might face as a genetic path cutter. Well, first of all, this has been something that's your calling, okay? This is something that you incarnated to do. You are, in a lot of ways, you are the balancer of the scales. In a lot of ways, you are the person who is here to activate keys and codes, and there is a knowing of that about your role. Okay, so that's why, and I've said this in previous content related to the topic of genetic path cutting. That's why you have felt ostracized, or you never quite felt like you fit in your family specifically, because a lot of this has to do with rectifying your ancestral tapestry. And what does that mean? Rectifying your ancestral tapestry. There's been a lot of, to keep us in a fallen state in the false matrix, to keep us out of our power, to keep us from realizing that we are God, goddess in form. We have, in a lot of ways, had the wool pulled over our eyes about what our actual inheritance is. What is our spiritual inheritance? Okay. A lot of that information has been stripped from our lineages over a period of hundreds of thousands of years. Okay. But we are living in a time where chickens are coming home to roost. Okay. The scales are being balanced on a cosmic kind of level. And there are beings who are incarnated in certain lineages to support with balancing the scale. And you are the genetic path cutters, okay? So you've been identified, and sometimes it can feel like you've been targeted, And it's really about how you look at it. There's a video I did, about a month or so back around my reflections on being a targeted individual. That is one way you could look at this. A lot of times people have that narrative or that framework. There's this whole network of beings out to get you. And that's one narrative, and you'll probably go through that as a genetic path cutter, to be honest. Like, you deal a lot with trust, not fully being able to trust your inner circle, or being very selective about the information that you share. And a lot of that is because of the role that you play on this planet at this time. And interference is a real thing. Karmic, I think they call it in the spiritual or tarot community, they call it karmic interference. That's a real thing, And so if you are in the early stages of genetic path cutting, you might be experiencing a lot of karmic interference and not feeling like you can trust people. and feeling like you have to watch your back and maybe being in a state of fear and all that kind of stuff. And I just want to say, like, that's something that can be overcome if you start looking at everything that's happening in your life from a very karmic standpoint. Okay, so whatever you're experiencing, your ancestors experienced the same thing. And you might actually be experiencing a time where, maybe parts of your ancestry were hunted down. That's happened many times in human history. And you might be tapping into ancestry that passed away within that vibration. Okay. But, if you start looking at things as, okay, what ancestral record is coming up to be reviewed and healed at this time? So you kind of need to take your emotions out of it a little bit and start seeing this as a really big, I don't even want to call it a research project because you use way more than your mind to do this, but kind of in a weird way, like a really weird immersive research project that you're in, and this is happening. You can see the demonstration of your ancestry and what the sort of stuff that they went through your life, through the lens of your life. Okay. And there's going to be certain cast of characters that come into your reality to show you things that need to be healed. It's the mirror effect. There's always people in your reality that are going to be mirroring to you something that you might need to heal within your DNA. Okay, so this does require you to get out of yourself and to think about your experiences from more of a global standpoint. Okay, and that in itself does require a lot of ego training, and that requires a lot of shadow work. That requires a lot of overcoming certain fears that have been programmed into you and that you've been indoctrinated in. And that's probably one of the first things that I would suggest to folks on this journey is to really work on deprogramming fear, deprogramming polarity-based thought forms, us versus them, black versus white, love versus hate. There's a lot of different polarity thought forms. And it's not to say that you'll just immediately heal them and go to the next level. A lot of times this ascension process is happening like an onion. There are these layers of an onion which are being peeled. And, each time you peel a layer, you go a little bit deeper beneath the surface, you go a little bit deeper beneath the surface, etc. Okay. And so it's if you imagine that your karmic legacy is this really, really large onion, and your vibrational, also it's you're going into certain vibrational bandwidths. It's you might work on a certain layer of karma as it relates to feeling targeted, for example, and you might overcome that, right? And you might peel that layer and then you ascend into some other karma, So being a genetic path cutter doesn't mean that your life is just going to be perfect and you're never going to experience any challenges, because to be honest, that's really not your mission. That's not what you're here to do. You're here to clear hundreds of thousands of years of density. And that might seem really overwhelming. That's also another phase that genetic path cutters get into is this is too much. I can't do this. This is way too much to ask of one person to do, or to, ask of me to do. Why me? That might be another sort of phase that you go through on this genetic path cutting journey, and this is that persecution. This is a kind of feeling persecuted, like you're being sacrificed almost. And that's another thing that you will tap into as you are on this genetic path cutting journey. I mean, sacrifice has been a huge indoctrination tool within the false matrix. And you're going to encounter that too. You're going to encounter times when, your ancestry felt sacrificed, and that might play out within certain dynamics within the script of your life or the cast of characters that come into your life. And then there's also a lot of atoning to do and forgiveness for the ancestors who sacrificed. And I'm not just talking about beings. I mean, Sacrifice has happened on all different realms and dimensions in the false matrix, but also animals, animal sacrifice, like that's included, so there's always going to be this balancing of the scales that you're doing on this genetic path cutting journey. And for the folks who are feeling overwhelmed or feeling like it's too much, once again, I would just say, try to flip the narrative a bit. Like, it's such an honor to be able to do this, to be able to connect with ancestors who maybe haven't been connected with in a really long time, and to integrate them, right? Because it's like, we are our ancestors. Like, our ancestors have our encoding. Okay. We have their encoding. So it's like, as we heal and integrate them, it's like a really cool process of soul retrieval. And it's like, we embody more and more of our gifts, and we become way more multidimensional. Okay. And we become way more powerful. All right. So don't think that you're doing this alone. All right. You are the catalyst a lot of times, but many times you're going to find that your ancestors are working and moving through you on this process. So you don't ever have to feel alone, even though it might look like you're alone. In the physical realm, in the 3D realm, it might really feel or look like you're alone in this. And yet you are this bridge builder, this multi-dimensional bridge builder. Okay, so you are never alone, and you're never doing this on your own. So just to kind of wrap up, if you are thinking about really diving into this genetic path cutting journey, spend a lot of time just deprogramming fear, doing the shadow work around feeling like you're not enough, feeling like you can't do these things. You might need to overcome some fear as it relates to travel. A lot of times this has been also programmed into folks on the path of genetic path cutting. Getting folks to feel like life is too hard. So why would I even, bother traveling? On top of that, life is already hard. And now, I'm traveling across the world. That doesn't even seem possible. A lot of times those are programs that you need to overcome and surmount. Get over those programs so that you can clear the pathway. All right. So that leads me to my next point. If there's a particular place in the earth that you feel really connected to, and that you just feel like, don't even think about it like, okay, I am African American, so I know that I have ancestry in Africa. Go beyond that, because your ancestral tapestry could be really large, and it goes over hundreds of thousands of years. So get out of the 3D narrative of looking up your ancestry. Oh, that's another thing that genetic path cutters will end up doing, is looking up their ancestry. I would say just be really mindful about the companies that you decide to work with to get your ancestral records from, and really tap into the vibration of these companies before you go into agreement with them as it relates to your DNA. Okay, everything is based upon agreement, both on paper, there's certain agreements that you sign, right, when you pay for the service and all that kind of stuff. But then there's also spiritual contracts and agreements too. And you just really want to think about where were these companies sourced from? I'm thinking 23andMe, Ancestry.com, etc. And will they be is it within their best interest to give you the exact, accurate information? Okay. I'm not saying that their information is not accurate. I'm just saying don't just take their word for it around what your ancestry is. That's one thing I would say. Hey, go get the DNA thing. That's a very common thing that we do when we're on this genetic path cutting path. And one thing that I did is I actually got a reading from a website called AfricanAncestry.com. It's a little on the pricey side. I'm not going to lie. You get it's a $300 test for just your, matrilineal side, and then another $300 test just for your patrilineal side. Okay. And then it's a very lengthy process and all that kind of stuff. But I did that because it was one of the companies. Well, first of all, I wanted to not just know the area in Africa that my ancestry was from. I wanted to know exact tribes. And, a lot of times like ancestry.com, they're being like really vague about where you're from, and I wanted to get more to like the tribe. But I also liked that this website does not sell your information. A lot of these other websites like ancestry.com, 23andMe and whatnot, they sell your information. Like that's something you consent to. That's on the 3D. We're not even getting into soul contracts, like what that looks like. But just on the 3D, like they can sell your information. Like they put you into a system, like, and a part of that is the criminal justice system too. So it's like, okay, let's say that you get an ancestry.com DNA test, right? Then your information is now in the more global system as it relates to crime, right? And so that might mean like, hey, you might have a second cousin, right, who gets convicted of something, and then they utilize your ancestry, your DNA results to kind of convict this cousin, right, this second cousin. And so, hey, that's an ethics thing. That's a case by case basis around whether or not you think that's cool or what have you. But I just wanted to kind of give you the back end of that too. So that's another thing is you might want to look for, for folks who maybe don't identify as much as being having ancestry from the continent of Africa, although I'm pretty sure a lot of us do on some level, but I guess that's a case-by-case basis. But you would at least want to find a company out there that agrees not to sell your information. And I think also information is sold to like pharmaceutical companies too with some of that I'm not like fully sure, but I definitely know there's like a whole criminal justice element as it relates to a lot of these DNA websites. So watch out for that. One thing on the path that a lot of folks do is they'll research their own lineages, and that requires time and like really sitting down and like mapping out your family tree and like going through the public records that are on file. And I'll be honest, I have not done that piece yet. I have gone straight into Akashic records. And I actually do want to do physical records at some point, but I've gone like straight into Akashic records on stuff. I think the way I'm working is actually Akashic records first. And I think one of the last record keeping things I'm going to do is the 3D physical plane stuff. Okay. I think I'm moving in that direction just because there's so many manipulations in the spiritual realm as it relates to ancestral record keeping. I think once I sort through all of those things, the physical records, the records on the 3D are going to make a lot more sense to me. So yeah, there is a lot of time though. This is a multi-year project because your DNA activation takes several years, and it's a marathon, not a sprint, You want to maintain your stamina. And so one thing that I am encouraging folks to do is to like find a way to incorporate, if you are a genetic path cutter, find ways to incorporate this into the way you earn a living too. Make sure that however you're earning a living, however you are generating income is incorporated within this process, because that is to be a genetic path cutter and to like really dive in as it relates to this. You do need to divest from the work pyramid, the typical 9-to-5 energy harvesting scheme that they have a lot of us on, because first of all, that's very karmic. It's very difficult to ascend in that system. And then also it is an energy drain, and you need all that energy that you're pouring into that company needs to now be invested in you and your lineage. Okay. And rectifying that and bringing justice for your lineage and supporting with clearing karma so that you can activate your DNA. Okay. And really like live your best life. That's one thing I will say. Taking this seriously moving from this is a someday thing, this is a dream that I've had, to like taking this really seriously has enhanced my quality of life exponentially. Okay, to the point where it's like I'm literally living a dream come true. Okay, something that I put into as being someday, or I thought I couldn't do it, or I thought it was frivolous, or I thought, I wouldn't have the resources to do it or the time to do it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's been a journey to get here though. And I want to like show people how I was able to deconstruct certain dynamics within my mind and within my physical reality to turn this dream into a reality. And so I'm now at a point where I am able to travel the world. And I don't just travel the world in terms of like looking at my bucket list and being like, oh, I want to go there next, and I want to go there. But like literally immersing myself into the records of the land and connecting with my ancestry through the land. And it can be pretty intense, and so I wanted to, the one thing this series is going to do as I share different countries I've been to is I'm going to share just different highs and lows on the journey, right? It hasn't all been sunshine and roses, but karma clearing is a really big part of ensuring that you have the most enjoyable travel experience as it relates to this. So one thing I'll share a genetic path cutting, I guess I'll call it an expedition, I don't know, that I had where I did not clear karma beforehand, or I didn't go deep enough to clear ancestral karma. I just focused on like personal soul contracts and thought forms, but I didn't go into the ancestral part. And there were a lot of disastrous occurrences that happened on that particular genetic path cutting expedition, which I'll share with y'all. It was good. It was amazing. Like I got the keys and codes that I needed, but it was really dramatic. It was like unnecessarily dramatic. Looking back on it, had I gone at the process from an ancestral karma clearing standpoint, even before I got on the land. So that's another thing you want to do is you want to start clearing karma with those ancestries, with the land before you get on it, so that you don't get caught up in certain foolery, So I've had that experience. I've also had an experience where I didn't fully clear the karma when I got there. Because I was not fully, I didn't fully understand that my ancestry was there. I just felt really called to a particular country and really didn't have any like 3D knowledge or information about it. And yet as soon as I landed there, was completely surrounded by ancestors. Like it was just like immediately like a familiarity when I landed. Okay. But at the same time, because I didn't clear karma, like I was in a lot of fear and things like that as it related to my environment. And yet when I did the karma clearing, like my complete travel experience shifted, right, dramatically. So there are certain things that you can put into action to connect with the land, to clear karma before you get there, so that it's a little bit more easeful. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but, just to kind of make your travel experience like more from a state of flow. Okay, so that's some more tips that I'll be sharing with folks. So I'm going to end it there for now. The next podcast, I guess this is, that I'll do as it relates to the topic of genetic path cutting, I'll take you on a journey of a specific country that I went to. I was there for 6 weeks, and how I kind of orchestrated and worked with my ancestors and worked with the land to essentially like get the keys and the codes that I needed, and just what my journey was like. So this is not a travel blog though, like this is a genetic path cutting blog. So travel is a big part of it, but it's really not about just seeing, the bucket list sites. It goes way deeper than that. So I want to kind of take you into my world a little bit, share my world a bit more with y'all as it relates to this. It's a huge part of my journey, and I only have talked about a very small portion of it until now, but I'm expanding that because I really think that this is context that folks need at this time and will be really supportive to folks on this journey. So I'm ready to dive deep with y'all on this. So stay tuned for the next part of this genetic path cutting series, as well as stay tuned for more information about the teach-in. And if you're seeking one-on-one support and guidance, like in terms of creating your travel itinerary and all that kind of stuff, reach out to me one-on-one, and we can schedule some time to make something happen. All right, sending y'all so much love, joy, peace, prosperity, and abundance until we meet again. Bye, y'all.